Hello again, and thank you for joining us on Journalist Hangout Sunday edition. I am Kemi Fola at DMO. Today on the program, Plateau killings continue despite curfew, as Katsina State Governor Masari tells people to buy weapons to defend themselves against bandits. And President Buhari says governors are ignoring flood warnings as floodwaters ravage 32 states. Later on the show, Journalist Hangout Weekend Special focuses on parents' appeal to the Lagos State government over a hike in fees for school feeding at model colleges. I'll be hanging out today with Adewale Adeoye and Sami Bemiru, while Babajide Kolade Otitoju will join us virtually from Port Harcourt. Before we bring in BK, I say a big welcome to my guests, Sami Bemiru and Wale Adeoye.
Yeah,
you're welcome. Well, if you're indeed, it's good to have you here again. If you're ready, Journalist Hangout starts now. Well, Fela Anikulapo Kuti, Nigeria's Afrobeat creator, was legendary and immortal. So also are some members of his band. One of them is Lekon Animashao, described by many art critics as exemplary, committed, and a model of loyalty. Animashao, popularly called Babani, was Fela's band leader for 32 years. He also served Seun Kuti, that's the son, for 19 years. Babani was honored with a series of activities to mark his 85th birthday in Lagos last week. And one of these activities was a symposium titled Music as a Weapon for Socio-Political Development, which attracted dignitaries like art critic Benson Idonije, who introduced Babani to Fela, as well as journalist and civil society activist Lanre Arogundade and our own BKO. Let's share part of their discussions on the legendary Fela and Babani during the symposium with you.
I'd known him before Fela, because as a matter of fact, I was the one who introduced him to Fela. So when we were going to form the Kula Lobitos, the second tradition of this band in Nigeria, and we configured the instrumentalization, his name came, I introduced the name to Fela. So when I was scouting around for musicians, it was him that was our first choice. But Fela did not know that he was as good as that until he came for the interview in his house. A man of impeccable character. He was very loyal. The way he came across to us as a fine musician was the fact that when we began the band in 1964 and we started rehearsing, he didn't need to rehearse. While the other musicians came 3 times a week to rehearse, and Fela was taking them through these parts. Well, he could say, you just come and perform, because he could sight read. Himself and a guy called Isaac Olashuba were the top dogs of the band. Leko Animation was walking tall, so he was a fine musician. As far as his loyalty is concerned, he stayed with the band until the end.
Babani will render Fela's song as if he was Fela, and everybody will wonder. For those who had not seen Fela before, would think that it was Fela that was singing. But how does this mix with what we have? Socio-political development of this country. Every song that Fela has sung, even the songs of Kula Lobito days, even the Jenko Kus and the rest of them, they speak to what we are witnessing in Nigeria today. Why are we here?
Fela Anikulapo Kuti, described as a musical and socio-political voice of international significance, of course, stands out in the tradition under examination. And so I quickly look at the place of Fela's Afrobeat. Fela's Afrobeat remains and would forever be a perfect living example of the power of music in mobilizing the people for political actions, change, and development. Fela's numerous lyrics against injustice, abuse of power, and the general megalomania of successive leaders in the country have continued to connect generations in unimaginable ways. So much so that those who were not born while he was alive could relate with the lyrics and link the message with their own existential condition.
To honor a patriot and a big study in loyalty. Because for a man to be band leader to a musical god for 32 years, if we are to use today's lingo, we will say no be my. It's not easy. The gods don't make people like Baba Ani anymore. The first thing that people think about these days is to get their own freedom. Even if their musical knowledge is not good enough, they don't stay that long anymore. So I want a round of applause for Baba for his loyalty. The great fella had this Damascus experience that resulted in the remarkable sharpening of the genius we will eternally celebrate. His encounter with Sandra Smith, or Sandra Isidore in London, opened new personal vistas for self-discovery. Sandra's deep reflections on the essence and viability of music as a weapon of social emancipation promptly influenced Fela to redirect his art to total Africanism, hence the elevation of Afrobeat to what we know it to be today.
Very interesting indeed, looking at the wonderful life that Baba Ani has lived, especially in his almost 50 years, if not more than, working with Fela and with the son, and now he's a remarkable 85 years old. One takeaway for me is that, and it has also been established by all the speakers who spoke about the legendary Baba Ani, is that he gave loyalty a new meaning. He gave that word a new meaning, looking at the way he stayed on with Fela even after his death. And he also says that if he has to live again, he would return. He would want to work with Fela all over again if given the chance.
Indeed, it speaks so much about his character as a person. Listening to all that has been said, you can't but agree that Baba Ani was, and he still is, an epitome of loyalty. For a man who committed 51 years of his earthly life, to one family, you don't get them easily anywhere. So I'd like to, join the rest of Nigerians and indeed all culture, enthusiasts to say a big happy birthday to a man who has left his footprints not just in the music and entertainment industry, but like you said, has given a whole new meaning to loyalty. We pray that God continues to keep him. I do believe, like many other Nigerians, that indeed he has a lot more to give, to Nigerians. I was pleased to read about his foundation, what he wants to do with the younger elements, and all that. So he needs all the support he can get from us, and indeed anyone who is interested or keen about the entertainment industry in Nigeria, which has grown, to become a major competitor, within the global space. So the kind of things that Babani wants to do is one that needs all the support. I read that he wants to set up musical studios and the rest of it. That's what we need,
Absolutely.
to grow not just the musical and entertainment industry, but to reach out and impact lives, across every country and strata of Nigerian society. Sadly, some of us missed the event, but like I said, he is worthy of being celebrated, and everyone who spoke, you could feel the accolade, so much that had been said about him, not just as an entertainer, but also a voice of reason. Having worked with one of the world's greatest, I wouldn't want to limit Fela to a Nigerian phenomenon.
Right.
But it just shows that he had so much to give,
and he still has. That's even my takeaway too from your contributions now to the birthday goodwill messages pouring in for Babani. But let's also hear from Wale Adeoye. What are your takeaways from the life of Babani?
I think for one thing, I have met him several times. One impressive thing is that it's good that we are celebrating him when he's alive, because not many musicians, not many heroes, have that kind of opportunity. For instance, before he met Fela, he actually started with Agilo and his Cubanos. That was 1959. And Agilo died February this year, and he was not that celebrated. And he met Fela actually at the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation in 1961, when where Fela was a producer. And he was also part of the dance orchestra. And then he joined Fela, I think, officially in 1965. And since then, he didn't look back. The most difficult moments that Fela passed through, Babani was with him. And Fela never had a rosy time. He was always having difficulty with authorities. In 1970, when he set up Kalakuta Republic, and the place was burned down in 1978, if you are not strong-hearted, because the tree is murder, from a second-story building, Beko was there. He was brutalized. Women were thrown away from the, attribution from the housetop and all that. But Babani was there. He stood with him. And also when they went to Los Angeles in 1969, he was there when Fela was arrested in Italy. And when the police came, Fela said, you won't come arrest like this. When I don't say you cannot arrest me, you go carry me. You cannot arrest me, you have to carry me, because just two policemen, you have to come in a team and carry me. And Fela was eventually released. He was there. And even when Fela was arrested in the time of Idiabon and sentenced to, he didn't abandon the family. So I think it's a good story in loyalty. It's a good story in the fact that he also shared Fela's revolutionary ideology, and he never betrayed the cause. So I think I'm glad that we are celebrating him today, because when you are talking about a particular musician, a tree cannot make a forest. Indeed. It's a combination of efforts. So Babani was, he was part of that great story.
Right. Well, BKO is live with us now. Hello, BKO, and I could totally relate with your birthday message about Baba Ani, because devoting 51 years of your life to serving one family, as Sam Ebemere put it, it is rare, especially in our generation today.
During the program, Baba Ani is a study in loyalty and in commitment. Whatever he wants to do, he sinks himself totally to it. He commits himself totally to it. So, Baba Ani is someone that a lot of our young musicians should learn from. In fact, I would say that the gods don't make the like of Baba Ani anymore, because these days, within a short time of working with someone, Nigerian artists will start thinking of setting up their own band. So, but for someone to work with Fela for 32 years, he refused to disband the the Egypt 80 band because he felt that the band boys needed to keep their means of livelihood. And for 19 years, he also worked with Insecurity as his band leader, mentoring him and ensuring that Insecurity grew to become the tremendous artist that he is today. So there's a lot that we can learn from this old man. Many people work for artists and they don't get the credit that they deserve. It's a thing of joy that somebody like German and Nikolapo and probably Nigeria's most famous art critic, that's Burna Boy's grandfather, Benson Idonije, thought it was fitting to honor Baba in the way that they have done. And it really makes me happy that in his lifetime he got the recognition that he richly deserves.
We wish him the best indeed and hope that all his dreams come true, especially for the development of the youth and the music industry in particular. Before we move on, let's also talk about a quite interesting report that transpired last week, and that is when the hunter becomes the hunted. And if that happens, something is seriously amiss. Or the police are angry right now over the detention and torture of some policemen accused by some vigilantes of selling Indian hemp in Edo State. And the two self-acclaimed policemen were seen handcuffed in a viral video after the illicit drugs were allegedly discovered in their vehicle. Let's share that video with you.
Can you police officers? You are even into drug distribution. You have cannabis stored in your vehicle that you are distributing. It's loud. This is one of the costliest police officer weed right now in the country. It's so expensive, 5,000 a wrap. That's what they sell. Look at the nylon. They are into selling. They sell because they have nylons. They have everything. They deal. Wow. Unbelievable. Now you are from fry pan to fire now.
You will open this one for us.
Yes,
who owns this one?
You think we are dollars here?
Keep on searching. It's okay now. We are on it. We are on it. Who owns this one?
My own.
What's this?
Not drug.
Medicine.
If I show you the get it,
Who owns this one?
my own. Between arrest.
Okay.
You did not tender it in the station.
It doesn't matter.
Okay. It doesn't matter.
No matter. No matter for them.
No matter.
No matter, but it matter for anybody who they
Open this one. Please, we are looking into this matter critically. Homeland does not oppress policemen.
No.
And we are working towards one goal. We are not police haters, we are family. Don't worry. See this motto?
That's why they molest me.
I'm a policeman. No, we don't. The drug agency will come.
What's exactly what?
Wait now. Not the drug like this now. We are not.
They pay me now.
The drug agency will come.
They pay me now.
You don't say they pay. You don't know.
They make you come. They say they pay you. They pay.
We are not human beings now.
And I be the thing now.
That we are constant. We not fit treat you like this.
Okay.
I want to ask him, how did you get this car?
It's my friend's car.
Your friend will get it.
Please, that your friend.
The owner of this car will come here.
We invite that your friend.
Yes, you should be invited.
Because of this.
And that video or that story now has more twists, as the police in Edo State is now saying that they're investigating the matter. those are actually policemen, but the vehicle in which they were said to have been riding in at the time doesn't belong to them. Sam, what do you make of this?
A very disturbing story. But that's our country for you. But I wouldn't want to go with a mob. I know that we have very serious challenges with the Nigerian police, but that does not completely rubbish that institution. We also know that there are indeed good policemen and women who have acquitted themselves, over time. So you will continue to have elements like this, not just within the police, but across most of our security, setups, who have turned themselves into collaborators, in criminal activities. This stands to be, highly condemned because trade in illicit drugs is not one that is permitted within our society. So one cannot, support, developments of this kind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what needs to be done basically is to have these suspects, prosecuted within the limits of the law. I wouldn't subscribe to jungle justice, and I think that what we need to do at all times is to ensure that our judicial processes, are allowed to play out rather than people taking laws into their hands.
All right.
We hear that vigilantes were the ones involved in the arrest. So, like you said, when the hunter becomes the hunted. But we would like justice to prevail. They should be properly tried, prosecuted, and allowed to have their time.
All right. Wale, what's your take before we, dive into the major business of the day?
I think it's an embarrassment, but it's not also strange. We have seen many cases where law enforcement agents are also lawbreakers. Just mere driving on the street, you see that where you are not supposed to take one way, you see somebody wearing police uniform or army uniform, you will be taking BRT lane and nothing happens to him. So we have seen such instances. But that does not mean that we need to rubbish the institutions. It means that we need to help them to be able to be more responsive to public needs. And we are talking about, the police needs to improve on its background checks in terms of recruitment. When you are recruiting people there, you need to do a lot of background check to know who they were before joining the force. And here we also see the power of the social media, because this could have been denied if not for the fact that people are able to see it. So policemen should be very careful, because you never know who is taking your images. So they need to be very careful when they are performing public functions.
Well, we'll see how it all plays out in the end. Of course, many people are going to be watching now to see how, now that these police officers are said to be suspects, how this will be resolved, especially with drugs, being in the mix. But let's go straight away now to big issue, or the first big issue on the show today. For years, the killings in Plateau State as a result of communal conflicts have defied solutions. The recent 24-hour curfew declared by Governor Simon Lalong in the Jos North, Jos South and Bassa local government areas after fresh crisis between the Irigwe and herdsmen erupted could achieve little. Gunmen attacked and killed some residents of Tafigana and Dong villages while the curfew was still in force. And the state government has now relaxed the curfew from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. daily beginning from Thursday last week. BKO, despite the curfew in place, well, partially now, there's still a lot of uncertainty, fear, and attacks haven't eased.
Yes, because we are talking about Plateau State, where we've had years of sectarian disharmony, years of violent convulsions, and bloodletting. The people have still not resolved to stop killing one another. There was the story of a certain Doris. Doris was a 100-level University of Jos student who was going to church the day after the 22 persons were killed. She was going to church in a tricycle and they were being chased. She ran out of the tricycle, but because she was wearing high heels, her shoes had high heels, so she could not run, and she was attacked and killed. They even dismembered her body. This is the sort of thing that keeps happening in Plateau State. Some time ago, it was Rion that was in the news. Barkin Ladi was in the news for constant bloodletting. Now it is Jebu Miangu in Basa local government that is in the news. There had been killings for weeks in that local government, in that locality. And for so long, we couldn't get them to stop killing one another. So what happened last Saturday was just a continuation of those killings. It is the manner in which the people met their death that is particularly worrisome. There is no reason in the world for commuters to be attacked, people moving from one community to another who have no hand in the violence that is going on, to come under attack. Nigerians have the right, the power to move from any part of the country to another. There is no reason in the world to attack people. So it's a shame, it's a national shame that this has happened. And the question that I keep asking myself is, when are we going to do something about all the reports of the Commission of Inquiry about just killings? We had that of the one that was headed by Justice Ajibola. There was another one headed by, I think, one Fiberisima. Another one headed by, I think, Nikitobi. So the question is, when are we going to look at their findings and bring people who deserve to be brought to justice? Because if we do not find the willpower to punish offenders, then this kind of killings will continue. People will keep taking the law in their hands if the government fails to take decisive steps to end the killings. Government must do much more than it's doing at this time to ensure that this cycle of killings in Plateau State comes to an end. Today it is Basa. Who knows which part of Jos will be set alight by killers tomorrow. So this has to end. 2001, we had so many people killed in Plateau State. 2010, we had so many people killed. It is too recurrent for any Nigerian to be comfortable about. And there is also the prospect of this kind of killings even escalating and spreading to other parts of the country, because some of the rhetorics that are coming even from that area are not cheerful. And the security agencies must do better. How can the 3rd Armored Division of the Nigerian Army be located within Basa local government, about 10 minutes drive from the location where these killings are happening, and they cannot put an end to it? I don't know how anyone can explain that. Basa Kingdom is the host of the Army 3rd Division, 3rd Armored Division headquarters. So they should be in position to stop these people from killing one another. But everyone can see that when it comes to security, we are somewhat belly up. Nigeria is somewhat belly up. We are now grouped alongside with Iraq, Afghanistan, among the countries, and Syria, among the countries that are most insecure, and it's really, really shameful.
All right, BKO, before we continue any further now, to join in this conversation on the situation in Plateau State, joining us via Zoom from Jos is the chairman of the Christian Association of Nigeria in North Central, Reverend James Pam. Welcome to Journalist Hangout. Also, the Commissioner for Information and Communication in Plateau State, Dan Manjam, is also joining us from Jos via Zoom for more insight on the situation in Jos. But let me begin with Reverend James Pam. Welcome to the program once again. What are your findings on the crisis in Jos? Only last week, travelers were caught in the web, and in the words of the Ondo State government, they were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Unfortunately, they are no more. They are the victims of the crisis brewing in Jos, and attacks are reportedly continuing. Okay, well, we'll try to reconnect with Reverend Pam. Let's get insight from the Commissioner for Information and Communication in Plateau State, Dan Manjam. What are your findings, or what's the government's findings on the recurrent violence in Plateau at this time?
The findings, government findings, have been embedded in the various commissions of inquiry. But of the recent one, investigation is still on. We cannot begin to say that we begin to blame, but what clearly stands out is that these are criminal elements that just took a swipe on the people, and they took advantage.
All right, that was Dan Manjam, the Commissioner for Information and Communication. If you're still with us,
2008.
All right, carry on,
the local
please.
government elections. It was a local government election, but no political party's office was touched. But mosques and churches were burnt, and it becomes so worrisome. But I can tell you that for this one that happened about a week ago, it was clearly an issue of people that wanted to take advantage of the situation to loot. And you know, criminality does not have a tribe, it does not have language, it does not have ethnic nationality. Clearly, that is what has been. But we are still awaiting prosecution from the courts, from the authorities, for us to be able to ascertain exactly who is involved, because already bad press has started stereotyping a particular ethnic group, which government does not have a buy-in into that. As a government, it is an act that is being perpetrated by miscreants to be able to to loot people's property.
All right, Mr. Manjam, we put you on hold. Thanks for your initial contributions now to the subject at hand. But let's compare your findings with that of Reverend James Pam, who is the chairman of the Christian Association of Nigeria in North Central. Reverend Pam, what are your findings on the situation in Jos at this time? All right. In the meantime, Sam, what do you make of the Plateau State government's position?
Well, I'd like to begin by saying that stories out of Plateau State are indeed very distressing, you know, and sometimes you want to ask yourself, when will this bloodletting, you know, stop? Some have, you know, termed it 1 week, you know, one trouble. And it's not just in Plateau State, almost across, you know, every part of the country, sadly. You know, even though we seem to have, you know, more of these disturbing issues relating to banditry, killing and terrorism, you know, in the northern part. But Plateau has remained a hotspot. Indeed, the crisis that we currently face in that area, especially in the Basan local government area, is one that dates back almost 20 years. Way back in 2001, the killings have been on and have persisted. And so, for any discerning soul, you want to ask, how come it's taking us, 20 years to find the solution, to this sectarian crisis, and that is what makes the whole issue really very sad. It would seem to me that government has been a bit tardy in managing it, because if you don't get to the root of the crisis, you just be treating the symptoms as it were, and that's not really very healthy. And that seems to be a major issue in attending to or containing internal crises, especially those around ethnic and religious face-offs among societies, or among Nigerians in certain parts of the country. So for Plateau states, I'm really very deeply concerned, that the issues still remain, in the front burner, not being able to deal with it. Oftentimes, you listen to the government, and you wonder if they indeed are thinking through these, challenges and trying to find solutions to it. I listened to, the Commissioner for Information. I mean, what do you expect to hear? They would speak to, at all times, efforts being made by government, but how much of these efforts are impacting on peace, on security in those states? And you'll be amazed when you look at circumstances around this development that we don't seem to have any. In Bassa, for instance, 39 communities I hear have been totally displaced. 39 communities. And what that means is that people are roaming out there, no shelter, no food, they can't live a healthy life.
All right, and
over 30,000.
Let's take up, that is also another issue that we can take up with the Commissioner for Information and Communication in Plateau State. Well, in addition to what Sammy Bemiri said, not only are residents also at risk and even suffering or bearing the brunt of the insecurity in Plateau State, governors from neighboring states and elsewhere are even moving on now to rescue their children who are in higher institutions or educational institutions in Plateau State. So the question is, Mr. Dan Manjam, what is the government doing at this time now to ensure that lives and properties are secure? Mr. Manjam.
Hello? Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, we as a government has, apart from the institutional framework which we have instituted, we are in talking terms with federal authorities. The GOC, Third Armored Division,
I can hear the Commissioner loud and clear. I can hear the Commissioner loud and clear.
He has stepped in by ensuring that the military is on the streets, has occupied these areas. The Commissioner of Police has been very, very helpful. Even the vigilante and hunters are doing joint patrols, and it has been very, very helpful. I can tell you that the IG, the Inspector General of Police, has sent helicopters that are on surveillance and has even sent 2 detachments of mobile police to come and help us with the situation. And as I talk to you right now, the situation is calm, it's under control. There has been rumors here and there, but we have been able to dispel those rumors. We are working, we are dishing out the correct facts of the matter. And as I talk to you today, Friday, worshippers, our Muslim brothers worshipped without any, even though there was an attempt to demonstrate by a sect of the Shiite Islamic group, but Friday went without any problem. Today, people went to churches unmolested. And as I tell you, the situation is calm. People are obeying the curfew that has been set in place, even though we agree that there are pockets of killings here and there. The chairman of Jos North local government has moved swiftly when a student of the University of Jos was stabbed at the filling station, AY Shafa filling station. He went ahead and sealed the filling station and demanded that the people that are working there must produce who has done that, because it was done in their vicinity. That goes to say, in line with what His Excellency the Governor of Plateau State has said, that these people that perpetrate these acts are not unknown. They cannot be ghosts. They are people that are within the communities, and the communities know them. And so community leaders will henceforth be held responsible if anything happens in their vicinity. They will be arrested and interrogated. And that has been done in the past. They were arrested, and even some of the people that have been arrested in this happening last week were interrogated, and there's a pointer to the fact that some of the community leaders that were arrested in the past and are on bail have a hand in what is happening. They have given confessional statements, and their bail conditions are being reviewed so that they will be arraigned by the appropriate authorities.
All right, Mr. Manjam, let me put you on hold and try again the connection of Reverend Pam. He's the CAN chairman in the North Central Zone. Reverend, today being a Sunday, of course, Christian faithful would no doubt want to worship in chapels across Plateau State. But what are you reading as to the situation in Jos at this time? Reverend Pam, you're live. Okay, we'll try to reconnect. We don't want to miss your take now on this crucial subject we're discussing. But in the meantime, Wale Adoye, you've listened to Mr. Manjam over and over again, you know, talking about government's efforts in ensuring that peace and order is restored. But what do you make of all his explanations?
Well, I think in terms of capacity, the state government, and it's not only Plateau State alone, is substantially weak. They can come with all sorts of recommendations and all that, but in terms of the capacity of the state to deal with these issues, I don't think most state governments don't have the capacity because they are not in control of the institutions of law enforcement. Don't forget that in 2012, a senator was killed, Senator Giang Dantong, who was representing Jos North. He was actually the chairman Senate Committee on Health. They were going to bury 50 people that were killed. And these people came with guns and shot him, killed him, including the House leader, Giang Filani. That was 2012. Nothing has happened up as we are speaking. Who are those people that killed these people? Has there been justice for the society? Has there been justice for perpetrators of crime? Has there been justice for victims of crime? Each time when there is a crisis, we come with spontaneous reactions. High power delegation, IG will send representatives, Senate, then we go to sleep again. What has happened to the recommendations of the former head of state, Gowon, who is also from that Plateau State? When after the war, we spoke about reconciliation, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. You know, the 3 R's of Gowon. Why is it that we cannot apply it also in Plateau State? What I see now is, revenge killings. People are boiling, there's anger. And because there's no justice for those who, there's no justice, people feel they can just do anything. We are talking about the curfew, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. But that past days, the students that were academic, Moses Chaku, Andonian, and Bagu, a student of history and a student of geology, and the medical student that he mentioned, they were attacked in broad daylight. So it means that the curfew may not actually be able to address the problem. He spoke about locking down a filling station, but it would have been better if they are able to improve in terms of CCTV cameras in the states along the highways and trouble spots. From what I'm saying, this thing will continue unless there is genuine reconciliation by identifying the key actors, which are mostly youths, identify the main perpetrators of crime. Let there be justice. If you don't have justice and people feel they can kill and get away with it, this thing will continue to happen. And it's leading to a kind of competition in terms of arms build-up. Because people feel, oh, you have more arms than I do, then I have to. And the government seems to be helpless. And also, we need to empower the states. And that's why we are talking about decentralization. Let there be state police. All these things they are talking about, the governor hasn't got control over the police commissioner.
All right, while I do it, let me try again to hear from Reverend Pam. Reverend Pam, are you there?
Dan Manjang, I heard him loud and clear.
Yeah, he was loud.
Reverend James Pam,
Yes.
Reverend James Pam, we still haven't heard your take on the crisis or the situation in Plateau State. Please speak to us on that. All right, while we still battle and brave the network issues now from Reverend Pam's side, finally, Mr. Manjam, what is your brief submission on efforts by the state governments to resolve the crisis? Because the gentlemen have spoken about unresolved differences among various sides now, various tribal, religious sides in Plateau State. So while the security measures are still, we hope that these measures will be fine-tuned and better. But what about peaceful or peace moves now to ensure that peace indeed is the story of Plateau State? Mr. Manjang.
Let me say clearly that I have talked of an institutional framework. An institutional framework that was instituted by the state government. Yes, can you hear me?
Mr. Manjang, carry on. You're live.
Yes,
Mr. Manjang, you're live. Carry on.
Yes, the state government came up with the Peace Building Agency, and the Peace Building Agency is doing tremendously well. It has been organizing. Yes, the Peace Building Agency has been doing extremely well. It has interfaced, organized parley between warring communities. And that agency, in fact, there are states that have copied from what we are doing. And as I talk to you, there are various levels of consultation, stakeholders. But what we have been able to isolate as a government is that it is not enough for us to bring stakeholders living behind the people that perpetrate this criminality. What that means is that when you invite people to government house and then you leave the people that are perpetrating the criminality, then it means there are gaps. If that gap we have been able to isolate, and we are taking that into cognizance by inviting community leaders, ward heads, religious leaders to be able to cascade it down, local government chairmen, cascade it down so that they can go and talk to their wards. But I can tell you that is yielding positive results. And that is why for the past 6 years, we didn't have this kind of occurrence. It became so surprising to us. But as I talk to you now, the situation is calm. Government has intervened and will continue to intervene. And the Peace Building Agency has been giving further directive to make sure that it does the needful by inviting.
All right, Mr. Dan Manjang, we thank you very much for your contributions on Journalist Hangout. We have run out of time on this because there are other issues up for discussion, but we hope your optimism on the part of the state government resonates with all residents in Plateau State, and peace, long-lasting peace indeed, is the order of the day. Sadly, we couldn't get the take of Reverend James Pam, the CAN chairman in the North Central. We will try to bring you back on subsequent editions so you can air your views. Let's still talk insecurity. This time, the worsening armed banditry in Nigeria's northwestern region, which puts us in a desperate situation that demands desperate measures to curb. In Katsina State, for example, a seemingly overwhelmed Governor Aminu Bello Masari is desperate for a way out, and he has urged people of the state to defend themselves against the bandits. While paying condolence visits to the families of the 10 persons who were killed After being hit by the Nigeria Customs Service vehicle, Governor Masari called on residents in areas prone to banditry to acquire measures or weapons and defend themselves against the bandits. And he noted that though prayers are important, it is morally wrong for people to submit meekly to the bandits without attempts to defend themselves. We'll bring in security consultant Dennis Amakre to speak on this. In the meantime, BKO, is that exactly how you see it now? Governor Bello Masari being desperate, and this desperation, quote and unquote, is also rubbing off wrongly on observers who are now calling for his resignation.
Well, everyone is frustrated. The governor is frustrated. It's not the first public officer to demand that Nigerians should physically protect themselves against bandits that are brandishing weapons, some of which even the Nigerian army does not have. So it's clear that he said so out of frustration. They had provided, governors of the Northwest have provided so much money to the armed forces. They had provided logistics, but we still can't protect our people in those areas. But the question for me is, even if the people want to buy guns to protect themselves, how many of those poor people in Katsina have got the money to buy guns to protect themselves against bandits? So whichever way we look at it, it is the responsibility of government to protect its citizens. The governor of Katsina State should know that. Yes, he's come up with amnesty. The amnesty never worked. He's given money to bandits to give up banditry. It never worked. So at some point, you feel some level of frustration because he also does not control the police nor the army. So he's frustrated, but he has to keep working with the federal authorities, with the chief of army staff, chief of air staff, and the rest of them to protect his people. He has to keep working at it. You can't tell the people to go harm themselves. The best you can do is form a vigilante group in your state, provide weapons for the vigilante, at least weapons with which they can defend themselves. I'm happy that in his state, in Sabua local government, for example, the vigilantes are standing up to the bandits, and some of those areas are safer now. But you can't tell the ordinary folks to simply arm themselves against bandits. In fact, it will lead to more bloodletting because these bandits, whenever civilians attack them, they come back, sometimes on market days, to slaughter people. We saw what happened a few days ago when bandits in Katsina State, after stealing cattle in Niger Republic, the Nigerian soldiers chased them into Nigerian territory, and the Nigerian soldiers didn't know that they were going to run into an ambush. They weren't expecting that, and these Nigerian bandits killed Nigerian soldiers in broad daylight. So the bandits are so well armed that it will amount to putting our civilian population in harm's way by suggesting that they should begin to arm themselves and stand up to these bandits. That is the responsibility of the government and the armed forces.
Let's get findings from security consultant Dennis Amakre. Mr. Amakre, we hope you're there with us. But the first arm of Governor Masari's advice to residents was that the meekness of the people is what is emboldening banditry. What do you make of that?
I'm happy that in his state.
I have other people talking. Can you hear me now?
Yes, You're live. Carry on.
Okay. All right. So I think what the governor had said, it's out of frustration that he's not able to protect his own people. And he's asking them to arm themselves and then fight back. But I'm going to take this metaphorically. You know, what he's actually saying is that people should start thinking of, you know, securing themselves. And securing yourself does not necessarily mean that you have to go and buy a lethal weapon. You know, you can have non-lethal weapons, and at the same time, you can also give information to the security agencies. Because think about it. If everybody now starts having, buying weapons and then protecting themselves, we're going to drift into a situation of anarchy. Anarchy in the sense that how do you manage it? Nigeria has laws controlling gun, the issuance and usage of gun. Now, how do you manage it if everybody goes out to the market and buy a gun and then start using it either to protect themselves or to shoot their wives and their enemies, you know? Because you know the temperament of the Nigerian. If he come back from work and there is no food, he might shoot his wife that she's not serious about giving him food. So, you know, the control of guns, arms and ammunition is very, very key in this thing. So it depends on, like I said, we are taking it metaphorically because it says that the Nigerian people have all along been standing by the side, looking at the military to do what it has to do. But, you know, in a war situation like this, every hand must be on deck. You know, we have to support the military in, you know, fighting out this particular thing. I think that's what it is, because the call has been coming up from everybody now. Right from 2018, T.Y. Danjuma has made the same call. Governor Otom has made the call. You have all kinds of, even the presidential advisor, Professor Sagi, have said it. But I think it will show that if government allow people to go and start buying arms to protect themselves, it shows that government has failed. And that is why the president himself, during his last meeting, has said that he's not going to leave office as a failure. So the people, the service chiefs, have to do more than what they are doing at this time.
Mr. Dennis Amakre, thank you for that submission, but we are not done with the subject. We will continue with all our guests on Journalist Hangout on TVC News. Please stay with us for this short break. Thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Journalist Hangout Sunday edition on TVC News. Well, let's get more contributions on the self-defense advice proffered by Katsina State Governor Bello Masari to residents. Sam, I could hear you revving to go, you know, listening to BKO and Mr. Makre on this issue. But where do you stand in this?
Well, I feel the pains of Governor Masari of Katsina State. But we should call a spade a spade. I have no doubt in my mind that the country's security architecture has failed. And if you listen very carefully to conversations around Nigeria's media and political space, you would agree with me that there has been this, persistent talk about the need for us to take another look at the way our security architecture is currently, built. Katsina is a very troubled state. The last time I checked, even the governor himself admitted that 10 local governments out of 34, that's nearly a third, are persistently under the attack of bandits. I don't know how else you want to describe it. It's almost near anarchy. I listened to my very good friend Amakri, trying to,
make a case.
Make a case, but we are very close to anarchy, not just in Katsina. Each time, I make my contributions, I want us to look at the larger picture. 10 local governments, nearly a third, you can't freely carry on with, activities as a citizen. Very disturbing.
Where do we go from here?
We need to be very honest. We need to be very sincere. We need to admit that what we have on ground at the moment is not, is not working for us. And my colleague here, Adeoye, talked about it. Why is it taking the country eternity to agree on a state policing system? Everybody has talked about it. Even the ruling party admits. So why are we foot dragging? That is the fact of the matter. You ask citizens to go defend themselves. How? And the country's laws don't permit you to carry arms except they are licensed. And even if you have the money and you want to procure AK-47, you won't be allowed. You probably will be permitted to carry one shakabula. And then set up vigilantes. How are you going to match? How are you going to match bandits who have weapons that can take out the Nigerian military in some cases? So we've got to be honest, we've got to be sincere, and we've got to show a sense of hurry in dealing with it. That is what Nigeria needs to do at the moment. Not to ask citizens to go put themselves in harm's way. Why have we elected our leaders to take care of us? If you take your minds back to what the Minister of Defense once said, it was like telling Nigerians, why are you afraid of these bandits? Are they not human beings? And then you wonder if such talks should be coming from top government officials who understand that citizens, ordinary citizens, do have their limitations. So, but like it's been said, this is coming from a man who is very frustrated. And like I said, I can feel. But then that is why he's sitting there in the government. The government house to render service at that level. We've got to find solutions to it. One way to deal with it, like I've said, is to honestly admit that things have gone down south. We must find solutions. One way to deal with that will be to take a more critical look of our security architecture and in a hurry deal with it. If we need, as a people, to sit down and talk about it and enact laws that can change the current structure that we have, we should do that very quickly. I don't know why we're foot dragging.
Well, this seems to be as close as we can get in terms of admission that things have really gone wrong and things aren't working in spite of the amnesty given to the bandits and every other move that had been on record to ensure peace in Katsina State. But if the governor is frustrated, as in what would be the mentality of the average resident in Katsina State at this time? So what needs to give?
Yes, it's been said that he made that statement out of frustration. He is also out of helplessness. He's helpless. And that message should sink into the hearts of Nigerian leaders, that if a governor appears not to have a solution to the violence, what is the fate of ordinary people on the street? The statement he made was made offhand. It was not a policy statement because it was not made after maybe federal state executive council meeting or something like that. And there is a process. If you want to have a policy in your state, you initiate a bill, you go to the state assembly, and then you pass it into law. We should also bear in mind that what he said actually contradicts the directive of the president, who said that anybody with illicit weapons should be,
arrested.
Yeah, should be arrested or even, attacked. So for someone that would not be saying that people should carry arms, those are two contradictory statements coming from
government,
the same government, the same party. So, and if one is to play the devil's advocate, imagine a situation where, let's say, this statement was made by the Rivers State governor. What will have been the interpretation? This statement was made by the governor of Katsina, the home state of the president. Imagine a situation where it was made by somebody in opposition, like Wike in Rivers. So as leaders, irrespective of the level of our anger, of our frustration, we must be very careful about statements that we make, because those statements can mislead a lot of people. Because if everybody follows the directive, that person will run foul of the law. That person will be arrested. To say, okay, the governor has said we can arm ourselves, then you decide to go and buy arms and carry those arms. Then what is the fate of women and children who are in Katsina State? Can they go and buy arms and defend themselves? What is the fate of travelers? Let's say from Lagos State, I'm traveling to Katsina. Do I need to go to Katsina with my weapons? What is the fate of foreigners? Englishmen, Irishmen, Indians coming to Katsina for business. Are they going to also carry arms to defend themselves? So there's no way we can justify the position of the governor, even though we sympathize with his situation. But the fact of the matter is that we need to address security. It's a major issue. And we have been saying it. They know the solution. Let the National Assembly amend the law and let states have their own police. It's as simple as that. But you are limiting the substance. You are shedding shadows. That will never help us. True. Let us come together and address this problem. Restructure the country to reflect federalism so that we can have peace and prosperity. BKO, Sam and Wale versus the contributions of Mr. Makri right now. Well, for Mr. Makri, he's saying that it may not just mean self-defense in the ordinary meaning of the term, but even for residents to also see themselves as partners in ensuring that security is restored in a state like Katsina, for example. But what do you make of Mr. Makri's position on this issue of self-defense? BKO, well, listening to all the other speakers now on this issue against what you initially said as to the desperation of Governor Masari, of course, we also have established here that even that directive or that advice to for people to defend themselves also has, could have further implications on the existing anarchy or the violence in Katsina State. But if people partner more with the government now to drive out banditry totally, as Mr. Makri has, proffered, how do you think that will go?
I don't know how the people can partner with government. People sometimes will provide actionable intelligence, but get frustrated that nothing gets done. Sometimes even these bandits will announce that they are coming to a particular community. The people will raise an alarm and nothing gets done. So it's not as if with government. They appear to work with government and the armed forces. They are doing their bit. A lot of them are laying down their lives as vigilantes to protect their communities. So many vigilantes have been slaughtered in Niger State, for example, because they are not permitted to carry the caliber of weapons. The bands that we have in Niger State are known to have overrun military bases in that state. So how does the ordinary Nigerian stand up to such people with their damn guns and the rest? In Katsina, Governor Masari State, bandits killed 18 soldiers in one day. I've said that repeatedly, in a village called Shifida, and nothing happened. That in itself is enough to instill fear in the people. Mm-hmm. So all that the people can do is to continue to pile pressure on government to protect them a lot more. They can't do better than this. In fact, in some of our communities that are close to Niger Republic, our people complain that when they make a distress call, the Nigerian gendarmes are faster to respond to distress calls than the Nigerian armed forces. So I honestly do not know what the people can do again. Government must do its best to provide weapons that the armed forces need, and provide their needs. Once they are able to do that, they will be able to do their jobs better. And then collaborators within the armed forces have to be fished out, because there are collaborators even within the armed forces. In Zamfara State, a soldier who was supplying uniforms to bandits was arrested along with his wife, and that wasn't the first time. So even in this war, our armed forces need to purge themselves of the black legs within their ranks, and with those black legs within their ranks, it's going to be difficult to win the war. I do not want to see a situation in which our people get killed for standing up to bandits, because they've not got the kind of weapons at the disposal of these bandits. They have general purpose machine guns. Some of them have anti-aircraft guns.
Right, BQ. Well, that said, let's get the closing remarks now from Mr. Dennis Amakre. The standpoint from BKO, Sam and Wale here is that the sole responsibility of security still lies at the feet of the government.
In fact, this particular government came into power by saying that security is one of the 3 pillars under which it is coming, and the responsibility belongs to government. Because if now everybody starts to protect themselves, that means that the government has failed. And of course, like I said, the president is very much aware of this, and he has said that the service chief should go out and do something about it, otherwise he's going to leave office in failure, which he does not want to be. So I think it is very, very necessary that they do something about this situation. This situation is very, very bad. And it has continued where all these bandits are coming. I still believe strongly, with the might of the Nigerian military and security forces, these bandits don't stand a chance. But we have to have, maybe we need a political will to go ahead and do this. Otherwise, asking people to now start arming themselves, I think instead of saying that the governor should just have resigned, that he could not handle the situation again.
Thank you very much, Dennis Amakre, for your submissions on the program today. But we turn now to the environment, where, like stealth robbers at night, flooding is ravaging many communities across Nigeria if left unchecked. And worried by this, President Muhammadu Buhari has urged federal authorities and state governments to prioritize information from weather forecasts and avert further disasters, while sympathizing with families and other victims of floods occasioned by this constant downpours in the last few weeks, which have led to the loss of lives, homes and farms in 32 states of the Federation. Well, President Buhari has now blamed some governors whom he says failed to heed warnings about floods. Well, Sam, the government has, the federal government, the president has spoken on this, but where do you stand? Are you in support that indeed the state government ignored the flood warnings, as released by NIMET and didn't do anything?
I'm struggling to, situate the anger coming from, the presidency. It's like chiding little kids and saying, "I will warn you not to do this. You didn't take any care," and all that. Again, that just tells you that a whole lot is wrong, with our leadership and the management of resources that are at our disposal. Environmental issues have become a global challenge, no doubt about it. We've heard about global warming and all that. So the occurrence of floods all over the country is one that has been predicted, over time. Well, how much of warnings that come from institutions that have been set up, to guide our leaders in the area of managing the environment is what is at play here. I think that coming from the presidency, we should not take that outburst, as a trivial matter. They should know, what is playing out. But you want to give them credit because so much has been said about the ecological fund. So when the presidency spoke and said the states were warned and they didn't take any care, it sends a reminder, it should remind us of how we have managed the ecological funds, what the states, the resources that have been put at the disposal of the states to manage the environment. So even though the presidency didn't, were not specific in terms of pointing accusing fingers, but I think for me, what is being said is like things that have been put in place to help us manage the environment, you guys are not doing them. And it's my worry, my concern that issues that have to do with funds that have been set aside are probably being mismanaged. There are so many reports out there of what states had done or had not done with those resources that have been specifically set aside to help manage issues concerning the environment. You talked about 32 states. Nigeria has 36. That simply says the entire country. That simply tells you nearly the whole country, is facing the challenge of flood, and we need to deal with it. Otherwise, we all sink with it. Erosion, all over the place. We're not able to tackle them, and the funds, set aside to do it are probably being mismanaged and all that. A lot of reports out there, and it's not really very encouraging. Our governors need to do a lot more in terms of, standing up to, global environmental challenges.
Let me bring in Desmond Maja-Kodume. Of course, many of us know him, a renowned environmentalist. Mr. Maja-Kodume, welcome to Journalist Hangout Sunday Special. But talking about anti-flood measures provided by the federal and state governments, what do you read from where you are?
It's a laughable state. Especially when we just reflect back on the remarks of the Secretary General of the United Nations 2 weeks ago, when the report from the International Panel for Climate Change came in, that is their 7-yearly report. And basically the report said climate change is very real, that what we have done to the environment will definitely trigger off catastrophic consequences, which we are seeing right now. As we're talking right now, in New York City, there's flood. In California, there's fire. In Nigeria, 2 days ago, there was flood. We are seeing the very reaction of what they said. But the Secretary General said that this is no longer a crisis. It is an emergency because time is running out to address the situation. And what he was talking about was the fact that we're driving up the average temperature of the earth to a point whereby the heating of the earth shall trigger off more release of more greenhouse gases, which will cause more heating, which will cause more aberrant weather conditions, which will definitely cause far more flooding. Also, that report said that no matter what we do now, the oceans shall rise by 1/4 of a meter within the next 10 to 20 years. So are we taking it seriously enough? Not at all. Not at all. Especially based on the fact that it was only last year where our dear president went to the global community and he promised that Nigeria is going to plant 25 million trees, because trees are one of the things that will help the situation because they will draw down those greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. So far, we've only, as far as we've been able to know, because we were involved through some NGOs, we've only been able to plant about 5 to 6 million trees. This is after our president promised a year ago that we're going to plant the trees, and the trees will help with the flooding, especially if you plant them in the right areas, erosion, and also, as we said, sequestration. So definitely, we're not doing it. This is an emergency, but we should be very, very careful Because what it looks as if is happening is that nature, yes, nature is now fighting back. In fact, Secretary General also said that. He said mankind is waging war against nature, and this is suicidal because nature always fights back, and she's doing so with ferocity. And that's exactly what's happening. It's like a direct manifestation of laws of retribution. What you sow, you reap. So if anybody is messing around with funds, ecological funds or other funds that can help to ameliorate this, they should be very careful, because the lives of people will be directly upon their heads. This is the law of retribution. Otherwise, our scriptures are just fairy tales.
All right,
Because
Mr.
from my
Majekodunmi,
limited knowledge of scripture, they say action and reaction.
Mr. Majekodunmi, apologies for interrupting, but the rains are upon us now. From an environmentalist point of view, and despite the warnings issued by the agencies concerned, what quick fix solutions can we have now in Nigeria to avert disaster? Like Sam Ibemere said, 32 states in a country out of 36 plus the FCT. That's as good as saying almost everyone, almost every state. And Lagos, the commercial capital of the country, isn't left out. So what quick fix solutions, back to my question, can we have? I know you get asked that a lot of times, but for this specific flood episode, what do you make? What do you think we can do as residents and the government?
We have to be practical. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the first thing comes, in our minds. We now have to now start saying, okay, we need to do the right thing. We've been messing around with nature too much. There needs to be a lot of awareness, a lot of publicity for people. Just things like blocking drains, throwing plastic all over the place. That definitely doesn't help. And then the people need to rise up and demand for their governments to do the right kind of things with the drainage systems. Put correct, good drainage systems in place. It's not too late to do that and to start clearing drains. I've seen some drains that have been cleared, at least in Lagos. They seem to be doing the right thing now. But believe you me, there's a lot more that needs to be done. And then next year, we'll get over the floods. The floods will come, they will go. We pray they won't take too many people out. If they do, then those who are responsible for ensuring that the remedial actions were taken will certainly get a negative reaction. And then next year, we need to really, really concentrate and focus on this. It is an emergency. We shouldn't take it lightly. And the good news is that, hey, in order to solve the problem, we all got to come together and do the right thing. So clear the drains, don't throw rubbish all over the place, and plant hundreds and hundreds of millions of trees and stop the pollution. These things will certainly help.
Oh, all right, let me get to hear from Mr. Adeoye.
Yeah.
Okay, so does it appear to you that the federal government is exonerating itself as it blames certain state governors, or is it a matter of lack of proper coordination now between the state and the federal governments?
I think we don't have long-term and short-term plans. Even when it appears as if we have them, when it comes to implementation, the strategies are not effective. We are talking about ecological fund. That was since 1981. It was a Kigbo commission that was set up that made that recommendation. And they set up that office in 1985. That we are talking about over 40 years. How many trees have we planted? We are talking about, look at Lagos State, for instance. I mean, Lagos tried. They said they planted about, and you could see some of those trees. And maybe Cross River, Ekiti State, and a few of them. But beyond that, go to our communities, our forest-dependent areas. People are coming from Lebanon, from China to cut down the trees for economic gains. The trees that they used to manufacture red track, Chinese people come here, fall down the streets and take them away. Nobody cares. And that's not about federal government alone. It's about state government. It's about our communities. There is no consciousness on the part of our community leaders in terms of the fact that what we are seeing is environmental terrorism, is destruction of our livelihood, is a kind of, an attempt to destroy our future. And I think it's time for us to rise up, and we are not just talking about federal government alone. Communities, people must be conscious that once those trees and the beautiful flowers are gone, the fauna and all that, then we are gone. Because that is what we depend on to live on. is our future, is our mother. So it's a collective effort. It's not just about the federal government alone. Communities must also rise up to this occasion. And I think I agree with him that we are in an emergency situation. The impact on biodiversity, the impact of on natural water, the impact on food chain, is terrible. And we just need to do something. For now, I don't think we are serious about taking effective measures.
All right. So, BKO, you have the final bite on the flood situation in Nigeria. What's the way out for you?
We've got to do our best in the area of flood management, because really these are natural occurrences. We cannot stop flooding, but we've got to manage flooding better. When we bear in mind the dangers inherent in flooding, for example, the cholera outbreak that we have experienced in Katsina and many other states, a lot of it was caused by flooding. A lot of it was caused by flooding. And you can see that in a place like Katsina, more than 1,500 houses have been destroyed, and 800 in Faskari alone, and 300 in Sabua local government. So, and many of their roads flooded. Many people have lost their means of livelihood, their crops, their houses. So, we've got to manage this situation better. And we allow people, even in urban centers, we allow people to build houses on floodplains. And government lacks the political will to remove those houses built on floodplains, because some of them are owned by untouchables in our society. As long as we tolerate such aberrant behavior, it will be difficult to stop flooding. And then the way our people dump waste indiscriminately into drains, they won't allow the drains to do their job of keeping our roads flood free, because by the time you clog those drains, then the water must find another outlet. So this is the problem that we face. I just pray that this year will not be as bad as the year 2012, when a lot of our communities were ravaged by flood and we lost many lives. So the president has issued a warning. At every level, we must take action to control flooding and mitigate the pains that it inflicts on our people year on year.
All right. Well, BKO, we can still spend a few minutes now for Mr. Maje Kudumi, because he's the expert now on this very dire environmental emergency, as he puts it. But talking about this ecological fund that have been established as it could be the solution now to the flood problems we have recurrently in Nigeria. But what say do activists like yourself even have in how these funds are dispensed with? All right, it appears we have lost connection with Mr. Desmond Maje Kudumi to speak, give his final views on that. But we will just move on now to talk about the next topic now, which is education in Lagos State, as the Ministry of Education is on a collision course with parents of students in the boarding houses of the 17 model colleges and upgraded secondary schools in the state. Now, this is over a proposed school fees hike, and the parents have condemned any hike in school fees. This, they say, in view of rising inflation across the country. And in this Sunday special, the chairman and officials of the Model Colleges Parents Forum have now accused the school authorities of misappropriation, appealing to Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu for intervention. TVC News' Abiola Sholanke has the report.
On the 7th of July, The Lagos State Ministry of Education met with parents of students in boarding houses in all its 17 model colleges and upgraded secondary schools over a proposed school fees hike. The parents were informed about the government's plan to increase the boarding fees payable by junior and secondary school students from 25,000 to 75,000 naira. The state government attributed this to inflation and rising cost of foodstuff in the markets. The permanent secretary in the State Ministry of Education, Abose Diadilaja, says government calculated that it would take 125,000 naira to feed each child for a term, but the state will subsidize the cost to 75,000 naira. The ministry told parents that if they could not pay the new fee, their wards will be transferred to nearby public secondary schools without boarding facilities. But the parents disagreed with the planned hike and suggestion for transfer of their wards to other schools. Chairman of the Coalition of Chairmen and Secretaries of the Parents Forum for 17 Model Colleges, Dakwa Dawodu, says from their own research, 18,000 naira was enough to cover the feeding cost of each child and salary payments for the cooks per term. He said parents are only willing to pay 5,000 naira extra on the 25,000 naira to cover emergencies.
What we're talking about is feeding wouldn't take more than 18,000. All other services, all other payments, items of expenditure, be it for the house matrons, because they tell us we are paying for them, for the kitchen staffers, and even to purify the water, because the government is good enough to have provided the infrastructure of water. But to make it drinkable, yes, you've got to go through your purifiers there. Everything is consumed and subsumed in the 7,000 naira on top. The 5,000 is just for the contingency of whatever we have not thought.
Dawodu explains that the 200% increase was rejected and the rejection is not based on plea.
I don't know by what percentage they have gotten from the Office of Statistics that inflation has gotten to be above 200%. No. And we have done our calculations. The 25,000 is way out. Even with the 25,000, we found that 18,000 naira can conveniently feed each of these children in the 3 months, while the remaining 7,000 naira could be used for ancillary services. And thus, we have made a counter proposal of 30,000 naira per child per term, the additional 5,000 naira coming in, because we parents believe we also are part of the government, we are part of this administration, and we have been undertaking interventionist projects in most of these schools for the benefits of our children, and we now want to partner with the state government in getting the best for our school children, so that when we have the additional fund, it will be used to set up school clinics, to buy drugs, and some other items of expenditure for some things that they lack. That is why we have the contingency of 5,000.
He gave another reason why they cannot agree with the proposed increase by government, saying some parents struggle to pay the current 25,000 naira. He asked how the government expects them to cope with this change.
Good people of Lagos State should know that despite the fact that the Lagos State government is keeping up and trying its best with its free education policy, there are some elements within the Ministry of Education that want to put a lie and a lot of spanner into the works. Like we parents understand, if government in their free education policy, they are taking care of all schools and all tuition fees, but are now leaving it, they're now leaving it somewhat optional for those who can afford to pay for the welfare, feeding and welfare of these children in the boarding hostels.
Dawodu said the parents doubted that an increment would make a difference in the quality of food being fed to the children.
When somebody is given this sum of money in trust for our children, turns around, makes a mess of the disbursement, and now does not have the conscience to even give our children the meals that are adequate for them to survive with in the hostels. And the situation is so bad, some of these so-called principals are so petty. I have learned, because we now have a coalition of parents forum chairmen, they go to the extent of stopping parents from coming to inspect dormitories and coming to the dining rooms to look at what their children are being served. That is no more going to take place. There's going to be an amendment, a correction to that I can assure you.
Some parents of the children in the model colleges also aired their view.
Quite all right, we all know that things has increased actually, but not by 500%. And in this case, we all believe that there can be amendments and we can reach an agreement with government. And we believe in our government of the day, especially our governor Sanwo-Olu, he has a listening ear. On behalf of all parents. So they should help us to look into the matter, and we have a minimum agreement.
Now, most of the parents that they cannot afford to pay, they are forcing them to pay now. And then we have said it from our coalition chairman and secretary that the highest money we can pay is 15,000. But all those principals, they refuse to collect it from us, which is not supposed to do. They should look into it, that most of us they cannot pay it. So 25,000 is too much.
The parents appealed to the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu to do something about the proposed hike and monitor what the administrators are doing with the funds they get.
Respond to it, because we've written to the governor and we've also written to the State House of Assembly. And I know the governor would not want to be such who will be labeled as being anti-masses. The governor will not want to be one who will learn. He may not have read our petition up to now, but I believe with this teleconference or tele-interview, this will get to some of his aides and they will alert him. He wouldn't like the idea that some people are taking the free education scheme in Lagos State for granted, these evil principles, by having to ride hotshot over this amount.
Abiola Sholanke, TVC News, Lagos.
And representing the government at this time now on the program is the Lagos State Commissioner for Education, Folashade Adefisayo. She joins us via Zoom now for more discussion on this issue regarding the fees hike at Lagos State Model Colleges. Now the parents have spoken. They have outrightly rejected the increment proffered by the government. Mrs. Adefisayo, welcome to the program. But what's your response?
Thank you very much for having us here. Having me here representing the government. Well, we have discussed with them and they acknowledge that. We've met twice, even 3 times, to discuss the fees. I've listened to what they said, and one must empathize. Initially, we were going to go for 75,000, but after discussions, we went down to 50. And I will like to add this, that something we've never done before, we are going to start doing. We are going to give each model school subvention, because we actually found that the cost of maintaining them in the boarding house is about 125,000. You know, I don't know where they did their calculations, and I can't imagine a teenager eating 6,000 a month. But I leave that to them. I'm sure they did their calculations in their own way. This is coming, so what we agreed was that, look, between the 75 and 125, we would subsidize. Now they've insisted on 50. So we will now we've gone down to 50. So between 50 and 125, we are now going to provide subsidy. So we are actually going to ensure that the children eat well. That is extremely important to us. This was a decision that we took after a lot of thinking. These fees have held constant since 2006. In 2006, we were charging 25,000. In 2021, we are still charging 25,000. In 2006, a bag of rice was well below 10,000. I don't want to exaggerate, but today it's about 25. They keep saying this meal thing. Don't forget, we've done the calculations. A single egg is 80 naira. But we have at 25,000, we are only able to feed a child at 73 naira per meal. That is plainly ridiculous. And therefore, they in fact have had to add a lot more than 25,000. I doubt if they're really paying that much. I think many of them are having to support in a lot of ways. What we are saying is take that away, pay what this 50,000, and then we will make up the difference. Honestly, I empathize with them. It was not an easy decision. But we cannot run the schools that way. And apart from the fact that we are also, we will provide that subsidy, don't forget that it's free education, it's free tuition. They are not paying for teachers. They are not paying WAEC fees. Mr. Governor recently approved nearly R1 billion for WAEC fees for children across the whole state, including children in model colleges. They're not paying for all this. So education is still free, like in all our other schools. So it's just all we need this for is to support, their lives in the boarding house. And this means they are feeding, the cleaning, the gardening, the maintenance, the security. And I want to add that Mr. Governor has also invested in 8 of those schools, built new hostels in 8 of these schools. You know how much that would cost? Building hostels for like 200 children and equipping the hostels. So it's not as if we are not doing our bit. We are doing a lot more than we should, because you must remember that this free education, we are offering close to 1 million children. For their own 25,000, apart from the free tuition and all, we are also going to subsidize whatever fee, this 50,000, we are asking them to pay for school.
All right, Mrs. Adefisayo, allow me to ask further in the spirit of dialogue and openness, and I'm welcoming your openness even on this subject. But the parents are also alleging that there hasn't been enough accountability on the part of the schools, the certain principals. Of course, there are no names, but then they are also alleging that the funds or the fees they have even paid, the 25,000 they have been paid, haven't been properly managed. How are you working to address these concerns?
That was one of the things we discussed at all our meetings, and I assured them that we will keep a very strict surveillance on the spending of these funds, because apart from the fact that our QA department will be charged with the task, and TGPSs, the district permanent secretaries, will also be charged with the task, and we'll require them to make returns every month. And like I even gave them my number, that I'm open. You can send to me anonymously if you can confirm that your principal is doing so and so. Because I will tell you that many of the principals have been so sacrificial. They are using their own funds. And that is to feed the students and to look after them in many instances, because the money is just not enough. And I have enough proof for that. And many of the schools too, unless they are being unfair, will tell you that their principal has bent over backwards, has been very sacrificial. So maybe we have a few who are not obeying what you expect them to, but we will be very, very strict. We will not take that for granted. And any whistleblower, like I said, can call me.
All right, Mrs. Adefisayo, let me put you on hold and get reactions to all you have said. Beginning with BKO, now the government has said the fees hike would now be reduced, not from 125, not 125, not 75, but 50,000 naira now. Is that good enough, BKO?
Honestly, I sympathize with both the parents and the teachers, the state government as well. Everyone knows that inflation has been on an uptick in our country. So things are very expensive, and it's difficult to feed children properly at 73 naira per day. For many parents, some of them have up to 3 or 4 kids in those schools. So, and some of them are civil servants. So it's difficult to pay. It's really difficult to pay. We have not reached the point when we could say, oh, government could take care, or government can take care of everything. All I can appeal for is for both the parents and the state government to come to a middle ground. They've got to come to a middle ground. Since 2006, they've been paying 25,000. At some point, it has to go up in line with current realities. But let the parents and the government come to a middle ground in a manner that both sides will be pleased. That's all I can say.
All right. Well, how fair enough is BKO's position, Sam? Well, government is, proposing, we can still use the word proposal now, but government is proposing double the amount that parents have been paying over the years.
I share the sentiments expressed by our colleague BKO, and that is because the fundamentals don't really look good. I mean, we live in this country and we know what the economic stats, are reading. But one thing pleases me here, and that is the fact that there is an ongoing conversation between between parents, school authorities, and the government. And it will seem to me that some understanding, there is an understanding of the issues, and there are shifts in the positions that have been, there have been shifts, on the part of all stakeholders. Just like BKO said, one will encourage that these conversations, go on, and that a middle ground be reached, in the interest of education, not just for our students, but for the society at large. One thing I'd like to add here is that education is one of the key issues, in the talks about human, development index. For me, it's one that I'm really very passionate about, because for any society to make progress, you need to ensure that you're not just educating the populace, but that what is being dished out is indeed quality education, and that for me is what matters. No amount is too much to be committed to education. I don't even think that the minimum is being being considered in most of the budgets across the country. So I would like, just like BK, to see the ongoing conversations reach a position where every party agrees that the right concessions have been made. We're not seeing schools being locked up, and that for me is really very important. Like I said, the fundamentals don't look good at all. We're all parents, we run homes, and we know that the cost of things have indeed climbed.
Indeed. And even government isn't immune to these economic realities, Wale.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with what you said. There are strong arguments, on both sides. For the parents, some may have lost their jobs. Some have not seen increase in their pay for a very long time. And then they are also operating within a very difficult economic environment. But the same thing with the government. Lagos is facing so much pressure. A lot of people being displaced from northeast, northwest, everybody is coming to Lagos. And there is going to have a lot of impact on provision of social services. These people will use water, they will use light, they will use road. So there is so much pressure on Lagos in the past few years. And if you look at it, if you are talking about feeding children, let's say a term of 90 days, one term. If you make it 75,000, it's going to be 833 naira per day. If it's 30,000, it's going to be 333 naira to feed a child per day. If it's 40,000, it's 444 naira per day. This 50,000 naira you're talking about now is just 555 naira. So you imagine yourself, how can a child feed, with 555 naira?
Three square.
That's for 50,000.
Yeah, that's 553 naira. It's too small. So, when you look at all these things, and when we are talking about free education is not usually free. The responsibility is usually shifted to other people to pay, for that kind of, for cost. Other countries that have done free education, they tax some other people so that they now pull over that tax to resolve free education. But I think the parents are talking about transparency. What I think should be done is that the Parents Association should have a delegate to be part of the monitoring process, so that at least that will be able to satisfy them at the end of the day.
Mrs. Adefisayo, you have the final take, but let's not also forget that the state government has also or threatened, or should I say as a last option, if parents can still not afford the 50,000 naira proposal of fee hike, that affected students will go on to other public institutions in Lagos State. What's the implication of that? And again, you've heard all the gentlemen, you've heard them speak in response to your position as government spokesperson on this issue. How do you conclude on this matter?
Just dialoguing, listening, talking, explaining. No hostility whatsoever. We are all parents as well. We are all parents. The comment was just that, because one parent said, if I cannot pay the fees, what options do I have? And it was like, look, don't forget that in Lagos, we have about 350 junior secondary schools and senior secondary, say 700 in total. So there are options. If you cannot, because all you are paying, all we are asking them to pay is the cost of maintaining the boarding house, not tuition. And in our other schools, they don't pay tuition. So, no, there was no threat. I think I must take exception to that. And then if I can also talk about the fact that they want transparency and delegation, parent delegation be part of it. We have what we call the school-based management committee. That is like the board of governors of the school. Parents are there. They're represented there. And I think on the SBMC, they can make a very strong case for whatever it is they want to do. Because the SBMC, in effect, with the principal, runs the strategic direction of the school. They had board meetings and so on. So they are there. They also have a parents forum. The parents forum has been meeting with us. We are quite pleased to meet with them. And they even have a hierarchy in the parents forum. So we are not hostile to them in any way at all. In any way at all. I want to reiterate again. You see, the 50,000 is not all for feeding. It's actually 80% of it. That is 40,000 out of it. The remainder is for cutting grass, cleaning, security, gas in the school. Just cleaning the boarding house, cleaning materials and so on. Everything we have to do to maintain the boarding house. Because in fairness to the other children not in boarding house, they too enjoy everything those ones enjoy. And we are now ready to even subsidize to the tune of 75,000 per child, whereas they pay 50. So it's going to be like we are doing much more than they will be doing. But I thank you very much for listening to us.
And we thank you too very much, Honorable Commissioner for Lagos State, Commissioner for Education, Folashade Adefisayo. Thanks a lot for your contributions on this subject. And a big thank you to BKO who joined us. He's still in Port Harcourt. Continue to enjoy your stay. We wish you safe travels when you return back to base. And holding forth, Sam Ebemere and Wale Adeoye, thank you for the robust contributions on the program today.
Very much.
Thank you all for watching. It's really been 2 hours that couldn't have been complete without your active participation, watching us and gleaning as much as we hope you did. Remember, we're on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I'm Kemi Fola Adeyemo. Thanks for watching again. Bye for now. God bless Nigeria.